I don't think anyone who suffered a tragedy that has gotten through it in some way will tell you that I needed to find deeper meaning in my life. It's the only way I was able to manage. If not, the trauma, the tragedy is just too overwhelming. How do you manage? So there has to be some bigger picture that you so-called submit to, surrender to, and that allows you to carry on.
It's such a hard thing to articulate. Like I struggle to tell people that, the worst thing that ever happened to me also led to some of the best things. It led to the most growth for sure. Is there a way of articulating that? Because there's a lot of people right now who may feel that they can't overcome this thing, or they've buried it. Is there value in trying to go through the process, get to the other side?
You have to listen. The only way, what they say, the only way out is through. You can't avoid it. Once something has happened that is a tragic event, a loss, a death, or anything that is a setback, some people numb themselves. You just self-medicate, and you numb yourself, you distract yourself. But that doesn't mean the pain's not there. It just means you're not feeling it. It's like someone that kills their nerves. So it's not going to last. So the fact is, there's really no way out. It's like, I'll cry. Like one great scholar or teacher told a student who had a tragedy, he said, I don't have answers for you, but I can cry with you. Tears are very cathartic. They're very healing. There's nothing wrong to feeling that I'm not okay. It's fine. Some people just need to know that. They think, if I'm weak or vulnerable or I'm hurt or I'm crying, something's wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong with you. That's exactly what is natural. That when a person suffers, cry. And you don't need answers. And find people that will hold your hand. And if you're a person who's supporting someone who's gone through that, hold their hand, be there for them. You don't need to give answers. You don't need philosophies. You don't need explanations. I always say this, the greatest mind cannot speak to a bleeding heart. So it's not you're going to find some type of brilliant concept or brilliant philosophy that's going to explain away a tragedy. Tragedy is just too strong, too powerful for the mind to fathom, let's be honest. The mind cannot deal with it. So you have to go deeper than the mind. And the place that's deeper than the mind is love, faith, hope, meaning, and purpose. And that's what you hold on to for your dear life. And you just forge ahead. And some days are going to be harder and some will be easier. I'm not going to mince words. I'm not going to say we all know it's not a party. Sometimes it's very painful. But remember, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And if you can move from one day to the next, you get stronger, whether you know it or not. And ultimately, what will emerge is a new person, a person that you'll see that you went through the fire and you become a more powerful person in the process. I also say, always speak to others who've been there. So you're not alone. Loneliness is a very big problem here because when you suffer, you think that nobody can understand me. Nobody wants to be around a person who's in pain. They'll never get me. Having others that have been there and the empathy that they can bring to the table is a tremendous healing agent. Absolutely. Never underestimate that. Again, we go back, what pain does, it throws you out of your regular comfort zone. So all the tools that you had yesterday are not working. And that makes you feel desperate. Everything I was using, I thought I was in control of my life. And if I wasn't in control, I was able to do this, and I was able to buy this, and I was able to go to this one, And then suddenly you're left completely helpless and completely vulnerable, naked. And all those resources didn't work. And that is very demoralizing. So the answer is find deeper resources, and they're there. Now you need to dig deeper. There's really no option. And that's really, that's what it comes down to. And allow others in that want to help and could help, and reach out to others. Don't isolate yourself, because isolation and loneliness just exacerbates and makes the problem worse. Because then you marinate in your own pain and just reinforces again how bad things are. You need to be around people who have been through it, who have an optimism, hope. And I'm not talking about naive, just people who understand life, have seen the pains of life, but also seen the strengths that come from it.
Something you mentioned then was about it's okay to cry, it's okay to be in touch with that, reaching out to other people. And I think an issue that we see in, I would say, the newer generation is an unwillingness, among men, young men, unwillingness to open up and share and, cry, especially. And I would say with our audience, some of the guys who watch our video especially associate with being an alpha male, and to be an alpha male means to not show weakness. And
Right.
I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Well, listen, our society also feeds that stereotype, the toughness. To me, the toughest people are the people who know how to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a bad thing. It's honesty and it's truth. And it's actually the people that are most impressive are the ones that can be vulnerable. But vulnerability in our society has gotten this bad name of, you put it, weakness. Like if you're silent, it means you're weak. Oh, sometimes the smartest people know how to be silent. They know when to shut up. They know when to close, not to speak. It's a tragedy in many ways because our society cultivates that type of, you got to be a go-getter. As a matter of fact, you mentioned men. Many women are trying to copy men and do the same thing. But that approach to life, a more intimate, more gentle approach, that crying and emotions are very much part of who we are, is far healthier and far more real. And it's time to tell all the alphas that part of being a real tough guy is also knowing how to be a person who can be sensitive. And it's just not a dog-eats-dog world of survival of the fittest. Feeling for another and feeling for yourself is very, very human. As a matter of fact, it's the strongest tool we have. Because let me ask you this. If everybody's going to go with an alpha approach, what is that going to do for relationships and love? Isn't love also an element of vulnerability, of surrendering? There's another person. It's not just about me. But it goes back also to this egocentric society we live in. I always tell people, if you see someone that's too arrogant, they're probably very insecure. So they just hide it, they mask it with their aggression and so on. But they're really just afraid. A little child that's afraid. So I think a lot of the alphas you see are not alphas at all. They're just scared children that are putting on like you have those animals that make themselves bigger than they are to frighten others, but they're not really that way. Or the porcupine, the sharpest needles of the porcupine to protect the underbelly, which is the most sensitive underbelly of all animals. So sometimes the outer aggression and the outer strength is just masking inner vulnerability. And it's time to change that attitude. And it's really about finding yourself. So there are times we need to be strong, but there are times that it's perfectly fine to surrender and know there's another person in your life and you're giving, and you're, I don't say submitting, but you're also deferring, you yield. You don't have to always win. You don't have to, But we live in a world, again, it's a very egocentric world where it's about me, survival of the fittest, whoever's more powerful. If I don't take care of myself, no one else will. And that really cultivates a approach of being far more selfish and narcissistic. Like the guy that goes on a date and he speaks about himself for 2 hours. And then he turns to the woman and says, okay, enough about me. Now, what do you think about me? So like 2 levels of narcissism. First he talks about himself. Now he thinks in his benevolence, he's allowing her to talk about himself, about him, not about her. So this is the society. It's driven very much about me. And I think it comes from a deep insecurity. Because again, going back to purpose, if you don't know who you are, you're going to start creating all kinds of fabricated strengths. And in turn, it creates this illusion that being vulnerable or crying is weakness. Not weakness at all. It's great strength. Imagine a kettle that's boiling and there's no spout. It'll explode or implode. Tears, an expression of emotion, is like the spout. You have a lot of emotions in you. It's good to express them. It's good to cry out. It's a sign of a healthy expression. If not, what do you think happens? It ties you up in knots. We know the body keeps the score, as they say. Traumas of our lives that are not expressed, ultimately, they don't go away. They just go inward. And then you become this very tight individual filled with these complex emotions and neurosis because you've never allowed yourself to speak. I've met people who told me they haven't cried since they're 5 years old because they were told only babies cry. What happened to all those emotions? They imploded. And the person is generally, usually quite dysfunctional, to be very frank. I remember a guy came to see me and he was telling me how he's been bullied in his life and he's always the victim and he's always being hurt. It was really tragic. It just made me cry just to look at him. So I asked him, I said to him, tell me, have you ever cried about your life? He says, I haven't cried since I'm 5 years old. My father told me never cry. Only babies cry. And that, froze him. So I don't know. I didn't even know what I should say to him. I asked him to stand up. He was sitting in my office. And I stood up and I went over to him and I hugged him. He froze. I couldn't tell you. I felt like a solid piece of concrete. And I saw how tight he was. Like his whole body just froze up. Like I guess nobody had hugged him ever. And I just said, he said to me, "Why are you hugging me?" I said, "I just wanted to show some compassion, some feeling for you." But he couldn't even deal with it. And then he said to me this line. He said, "If I start crying, I don't think I'll ever stop. I have so much in me." So it's exactly the kettle. So that's called alpha male? That's not exactly alpha. A person who's unfortunately. My goal with it was one thing: give him the permission, the license. You can cry. You have a license to say I'm in pain. You have a license to say that I was hurt. That's always the beginning of any healing. Break the silence. Allow yourself to breathe. Don't hold it in. It's like trying to hold in the breath. No, you have to exhale. And that's part of healing.
As many of you know, we are independent creators and filmmakers, but there is a massive attack on us right now. Traditional media over the last few years has started to slowly die. They are no longer the independent voice that you first thought they were. That's why we've created Mulligan Brothers Patreon. We've built something special for our most dedicated supporters, and I want to break it down for you real quick. The supporter tier gets you ad-free early access to both video and audio versions of Mulligan Brothers interviews 24 hours before it goes public. The executive tier gets you everything that a supporter tier gets, plus more. Exclusive interviews and behind the scenes content, walk and talks, daily routines, unreleased interviews, the stuff that you don't see anywhere else. And finally, the executive producer tier. Everything from the supporter tier and the executive tier, plus exclusive perks. Access to our treatment packages. Be the first to see which guests are coming up and get insight into the topics we'll be discussing before anyone else. And you'll even get an executive producer credit on every single documentary that we make. So if you've ever wanted to support the Mulligan Brothers mission of inspiring change so we can go around the world and get these stories that nobody else will, this is exactly how you do it. Go to patreon.com/Mulligan Brothers or click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Join the community and help us inspire change.